First off, you want to start off with a bobber stop. I'll show you guys what that is. They're a little rubber stop that goes on your line and will stop your bobber from sliding up too far, and you'll be able to set an exact depth that you want to fish with these stops. You want to take your line and with these bobber stops, if you can see, there is a little loop, a little metal loop at the end of them, a little wire loop, and you run your line through that loop, just like so. See how that's doing that? Just kind of pinch it and slide it up onto your line, just like so. You see how that's sliding up all the way through until that, see your tag line here, till your tag line pops on through, just like so. And then you can just pull that on off and you're done. That's your bobber stop. Take that, slide that up. You can go ahead and set it to your depth, but I usually just slide it on up. That way I can go ahead and move on to the next step, and that is putting on a bead. And I get these beads from Walmart. They're cheaper than going out and buying the ones that are made for fishing. They're a little bit cheaper. You can get a mass amount of them just in your craft section in Walmart, pretty cheap. And they even have these metal beads here, and I try to keep a low profile, stay black line, that kind of stuff. That's one of the hardest things for fish to see. There's usually a lot of little black flakes and stuff floating around in the water, and they don't really pay attention to black stuff as much. So if the fish are real finicky, if it's a place that's fished a lot, you want to try and keep a low profile. You'll get better bites and things like that. But these little metal beads that I use, they also are a little magnetized, and that comes in handy, and I'll tell you why later. But just grab you a small one, feed your line on through, slide that baby up. Alright, next step. If you're using live bait, if you're using any live bait, anything like a live bluegill, goldfish, that kind of stuff, this can really come in handy. Take you just a little bluegill slip bobber. It don't have to be perfect. These are pretty cheap too. And then thread that on next. And you maybe, I've not seen any tutorials on how to do this part, because this little bobber right here is going to keep you from getting tangled up on yourself and having live bait swim around and tangle up your bobber and get it wrapped up and stuff. This really does help with that. But see, you got your bobber stop, your bead, and then your little slip bobber. And see how that comes to a stop? And that's what that stops for. It helps you choose the perfect depth that you want to fish. And you can even actually fish on bottom with these rigs and be pretty successful. I usually like to keep mine a couple inches to a foot off the bottom, depending on where the fish are at. You can move it around. Don't be afraid to move it around and change your depth if you're not getting any bites, because that can actually really help sometimes. Next step, you may be asking yourself, why in the world does he have a straw? And that is in part with this small bobber here. If you're not using live bait, skip putting this small bobber on and the straw, because you don't really need it unless you're getting tangled up or something anyways. You're just on casts, maybe you got a top heavy bobber or something that's not too great. I only use these if I'm using live bait, something that's swimming around and pretty strong, like a large bluegill or something like that, this really comes in handy. So next step, take your straw. You can just get any old straw. If it is a well-made straw, it will make a difference. I'm just using a little cheap straw because that's all I have right now. And you don't want to keep that part on there. We're going to want to cut that off. So I usually cut 3 or 4 inches, 3.5, something like that. Not that long. Slide this on your fishing line like so, and now we got something sort of like this. And I've seen people paint these straws to give them a little bit more durability and not tear as much, that kind of stuff. It also helps to try and cut this a little flush. That's a little crooked. Should have been paying attention more, but it'll work. So now you got your bead, a small bobber, and a straw, which leads us on to our next step, which is actually putting your catfish bobber on there. And this is an old one, but it's been a really great one actually. And these can be pretty fickle on feeding these through, just as a warning. I may luck out and get it first try. Sometimes they get stuck down at the bottom, and if they do that, I'll show you what you can do. It makes it a little bit easier getting it on through. Especially braid. Look at that, first try. Most of the time when I'm fishing and I'm trying to get back on the fish, that never happens. But if your line's getting hung up in there or bound up a little bit, you can take a little bit of mono, fluoro, whatever you got. Usually there's some laying on the ground, some really thick leader line or something somebody's trimmed. Just push it up in there and twirl it around like that and pull it out and try it again. Maybe even try and force feed down here while you're twirling. That usually can pop it right through. So now we got something that kind of looks like this. And what this does, whenever it hits the water, it's gonna, especially with this metal bead here, it's gonna want to pull it down some. It'll line up like that, and it'll be floating on the water like this. And this will keep you from getting so tangled up if he's running around. This will actually help keep your line pushed away from your bobber. As you can see there, you can rotate it around pretty freely and it's not going to get as tangled, especially when you got live bait. That's when I mostly use this straw and this small bobber thing. If not, then sometimes it can get pretty tangled casting. So I'm not using live bait, and then I'm going to stay away from the straw. I've got this bobber stop set down low just for demonstration here on how that stops and being able to see the whole rig, but you want to set that to your depth. I usually set mine to about 10 feet or more depending on where I'm fishing at. Alright, so next step. Get you a sinker. I like to use these bail sinkers because if you can see there, they got a little divot there for your bead to fall right in place, because we're going to be putting the bead on right after this. And here's where these magnetic metal beads really come into play. They're not necessarily magnetized, but I mean magnetic beads, but they are slightly magnetized, and they will usually get stuck right in there and keep these just flush and sliding true and protect your knot. Sometimes they may not stick right away, but usually once they start getting the water, these things stick really well to these. They're slightly magnetized. You even get these weird style ones that are a little flat with these beads I got, and those actually do pretty good for that top bead. Never had any issues with it. A lot of times I can see these a little bit better out in the water, and know if I'm hitting the right depth or not. If I see this bead up at the top of the bobber here, like this, if I'm fishing without that straw, then I know how deep I am. I know that my stops push that up to the top, because these have enough weight to where they're going to droop down. But if it's up towards the top here, I know my weight, my depth is about right. These you can usually see pretty good. But we're going to go ahead and put this sinker on. You can use different sinkers. I like the Bells because they have a smaller profile. They're not as heavy. A lot of people use these 1/4 ounce, 1 ounce, 2 ounce weights, or even lighter. Sometimes I go a little lighter because some of these fish are smart and they feel a little bit of weight, they may not take off with it. And I've had better hookups on less weight. You don't really need a ton of weight when you're fishing with a bobber, especially with this much float action going on here. You got 2 floats here, so that's quite a bit of resistance, and you don't really need these sinkers for them to hook up, especially if you're using a circle hook like that. But if I'm using a really lively, large bluegill or anything like that, I'm gonna want to go a smaller sinker. That way he doesn't pull it under so easy, and I'm not constantly being tricked by that bluegill thinking I've got one on there. So with this straw set up here, I'm gonna go a lighter sinker weight. Alright, so we got our sinker on there, threaded through. Now you get your other bead. See where these are magnetized? Another good thing about these metal beads, look, these aren't even on this string here. Some of these are on a string, but they're not going to go flying everywhere and roll off. They stay together really well, and I mean, that just is a plus. Sinker, bead, and that's going to slide right up in there just like so. And after a while, these tend to attach themselves perfectly right in that little hole, and this becomes one little unit here, just sliding up and down your line. And I just like the flushness of that. You don't tie your hook on after this. You want to put a swivel on there, especially if you're using live bait. This is going to keep your line from getting absolutely ruined. So what I like to do is tie a Palomar knot, whatever you want to call it. And if you guys want me to do some knot tying videos, I can do that. But I'm going to show you this one real quick. Just run your lines through your eye there. Run it back through to where you got kind of like a double line going through. And keep your little loop, keep your fingers in there, that way you don't pull your loop through. Take your double line here, your double line here, tie just a regular overhand knot. Now you just got like a double line overhand knot. Open up that little tag, your little loop, and take your swivel and just pop it through that hole like that. Pull that little loop on up, grab your main line, pull it tight. Some people wet it, dip a little bit of water in if it's having some trouble. With this braided line, you don't have to do that so much. And pull your tag line tight. The hardest part right there is getting all that lined on, especially this bad guy right here. He can be a nightmare to feed line through sometimes. But after that, get you some leader line. I got some 50-pound braided onyx line. This stuff's pretty cheap and it's really strong. I've never had this break on me, not once. If you're fishing around a lot of rocks, you might want to be careful of braid. It can shear off and you can get some mild abrasions in there. This stuff is great though. Had a lot of luck with this. It's good and stiff. It's almost like mono sometimes, but in the heat, if you're fishing really hot days, it can warp a little bit. So make sure you got your rod sitting in the shade or something like that if you're using black. It will cause you to bird's nest once it starts heating up. So I usually cut off about 18 inches or so as my leader, and that is a 8/0 Team Catfish circle hook. These are one of my favorites to use circle hook wise, but my go-to hook is this Kale hook, and I got these 50 of them, 50 Kale hooks that are 4/0s, and you can get a little bit bigger, but these were cheap. I mean, I paid, I think, $6 for 50 of them. That is really good. I mean, I'm not even close to running out. And these Kale hooks, if the circle hooks are failing me and I'm not getting good hookups on this circle hook here, then I'm always going to be fishing with this Kale hook. And I may go up to a bigger aught than that, not hooking up or something like that. But also, don't be afraid to downsize your hooks if you're not hooking up. You may have a small, it's still in your bait. You can drop down hook size and get those smaller fish. And I'm going to be probably using this Kale hook if I'm using live bait. And the reason why I use these Kale hooks, or shiner hooks too, they're called that for a reason. They're made for live bait. You hook them in the back and the tail, just like that. Let's say this is your fish here, and he's hooked in the back, just like that. And see how he's standing straight up? When this hook pops out on the other side, and when that fish comes to bite him, that hook's going to get him. If you don't know how to snell, then I'm going to show you. But you want to run your line down the edge of your hook here. Just take it and wrap it around. A lot of people say 6 times. I just do it till I feel comfortable. Then you take your long part here, so you still got your line sticking out down here beside your hook there that you ran down. You take that long part, take it, wrap it down, then take the end of it and just run it straight back up through your hook. This is one of the fastest knots you can tie, and it's a strong knot. Whenever you're doing a leader, it's hard to go wrong with snell. Onto my swivel here. Feed it through. And you want this loop to be kind of big, especially if you've already baited that hook or something. Sometimes I do that without thinking. Or if you got a large hook, because you're going to have to feed that hook through this loop. Take your hook, feed it through the loop, pull it tight. Boom. Trim up. And this one is good to go. Look at that. That's the main thing I wanted to show you guys, is this straw technique here. Because I do not see this anywhere. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and thanks for tuning in. I hope this helps. I definitely haven't seen any of these on YouTube, so there you go. There's your straw setup for live bait. I mean, this thing really does. It even looks cool in the water. It'll be standing up. It's going to be sitting there like that. and that bluegill will be swimming around, and that float's going to keep you from getting tangled up. See how that's keeping that line from getting tangled up? And well, it might not be a bad idea to make sure you got not a very sharp edge here too, because if you are using braid, I could see how that might fray it a little bit, but I've never had any trouble with them. But check it from time to time. If you do have a kind of a sharp straw, that'll keep you from worrying about it at least. That's it for this one. Peace out. Hey, I'm Russ from APPA Outdoors.
I'm James.
If you like that video, then please snag like and hook subscribe. Don't forget to comment down below, because if you don't, James is going to hit me in the face with this hot dog bun.